But it didn't end there. The remaining fleets faltered. Without their flagship, they lost their coordination. The royal forces took advantage of the confusion, launching a final assault. One by one, the enemy ships were destroyed, scattered across the sky like dying stars. Hours later, the sky was clear. The battle was over. Jake stood at the edge of the balcony once again, looking out at the peaceful city below. The battle had been won, but at a cost. The lives lost, the destruction, it was all part of the price of war. Avalora joined him, standing silently by his side. "We did it," Jake said quietly. "We did," she replied, her voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "But the war isn't over. Not yet." Jake turned to her, his gaze softening. "I know, but for the first time, I'm ready." Avalora smiled, her eyes filled with trust. "You've always been ready." Jake looked at the kingdom they had fought to protect, and for the first time, he didn't feel like he was pretending anymore. He was king, and this was his kingdom. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice firm. "Not anymore." And as they stood together, the future of the kingdom, and their own, began to take shape. It wasn't about the crown or the throne. It was about the people. It was about the choices they made, and the love they had found in the middle of a war. And together, they would face whatever came next. His fingers brushed the cold stone of the balcony railing as he let out a long, slow breath. "I was just pretending. But now, I can't let you go." Her eyes softened, the hardness in them melting away. "You never had to pretend. Not to me." Jake closed his eyes, the memories of his past life flooding his mind. He had always been a loner, never letting anyone too close, never letting anyone depend on him. But now he was in the middle of a war he didn't start, but one that would decide the fate of everything he had come to love. "I'm scared," Jake admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of failing. Scared of losing you. Scared of losing everything." Avalora reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Fear is a part of leadership. It's a part of being human. But it doesn't define us. It's what we do with that fear that matters." For a moment, Jake just held her hand, feeling the connection between them grow stronger. The weight of the crown seemed lighter when she was near him. And for the first time, he understood what it meant to have someone to fight for. Not just for survival, but for something more. "We can win this," Jake said, a sense of certainty growing inside him. "We have to." Avalora nodded. "We will. Together." The battle that followed was like no other. The enemy fleets were relentless, their ships closing in on the royal city with terrifying speed. Jake stood at the command center, his eyes locked on the holographic displays that showed the enemy's movements. The royal forces were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they fought with everything they had. Avalora was by his side, coordinating the defenses with precision, her mind sharp and focused. But even she knew that this would be the final test. The enemy was closing in, and there was no way to hide anymore. Jake's heart raced as he watched the first wave of enemy ships break through their outer defenses. The city's shields flickered, sparking under the intense assault. He could feel the tension in the air, the fear of the people, the uncertainty of the soldiers. "Hold the line," Jake shouted, his voice carrying over the command center. "We fight with everything we have." The roar of the battle filled the air as explosions erupted around them, shaking the palace and the city. Jake's armor hummed with energy, reacting to his every command, every movement. His hands clenched around the controls, and he could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. But this wasn't just about strategy. It wasn't about tactics. It was about the people he had come to care about. The kingdom. The future. Avalora's voice cut through the chaos. "Jake, we can't hold them off for long. We need to take down their flagship. It's the only way to break their resolve." Jake turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll do it. We don't have a choice." The plan was risky, The royal fleet would make a desperate push, using every ounce of power they had to break through the enemy defenses and target their flagship. But the enemy wasn't just a military force. They were a symbol of everything that threatened Jake's new life. The royal ships were scattered across the sky, dodging blasts and retaliating with every weapon at their disposal. Jake's pulse quickened as he boarded the lead vessel, Avalora by his side. This was it. This was their moment. The flagship loomed ahead, a dark behemoth of metal and fire. Jake gritted his teeth as they approached, his mind laser-focused on the target. Every second counted. "Lock onto their core," Jake ordered. "We hit them with everything." The crew followed his command, and the ship's weapons roared to life. A massive beam of energy shot forward, slamming into the flagship's shields, cracking them open. But it wasn't enough. They had to do more. Avalora placed her hand on Jake's arm. "We have one final option, a direct hit to their core. It's a suicide run." Jake looked at her, his breath shallow. He knew what she was suggesting, but there was no other way. The enemy had to be stopped. Without hesitation, Jake made the call. "Set course for the flagship. We do this now." The ship surged forward, dodging enemy fire, the world outside a blur of flashing lights and explosions. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the flagship. He could feel the heat of the blasts, the pressure of the moment. But he wasn't afraid. He wasn't scared. Not anymore. With a roar, the ship's final weapon activated, a concentrated blast aimed straight for the flagship's core. The blast hit dead center, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The flagship shuddered, then exploded in a blinding flash of light. Jake's ship rocked violently as the shockwave hit. The control systems flickered, and alarms blared. But they had done it. The enemy flagship was destroyed. Jake's mind spun. He had always assumed his presence here was random, a lucky accident. But now it felt like the weight of an entire galaxy rested on his shoulders. "Why?" Jake asked, his voice strained. "Why me?" Avalora closed the book gently, her fingers lingering on the pages. "Because you are the only one who can stop it from happening again." The truth hit Jake harder than any blow in battle. The king, the first human to rule this alien empire, had been betrayed by the very people he trusted. And now, history was repeating itself. The outer clans, the nobles, even the generals, they all feared the rise of a new human king. But it wasn't just fear. There was something darker at play. Jake ran a hand through his hair, pacing across the chamber. "This is bigger than just a war. They didn't just want me dead because I'm a king. They want to erase everything about him. Everything he built." Avalora's eyes narrowed. "They're scared of what his return means, scared of what you represent." "I don't represent anything," Jake said bitterly. "I'm just a guy who got lucky." "You've always been more than that, Jake," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "You just don't see it yet." Jake stopped in front of her, meeting her eyes. "What's the real reason they want me gone?" She hesitated before answering. "Because the first king's bloodline is the key to the throne's true power. The one who wears the crown and the armor becomes invincible. It is said that the first king was a god among them. And if the prophecy is true, if you are truly his return, they believe that if you take the throne, no one will be able to stop you." Jake's stomach churned. "A god?" "Yes," Avalora said. "And that's what they fear." Hours passed as they discussed the past, piecing together fragments of history that had long been hidden. By the time they left the vault, the weight of the truth pressed down on both of them. Jake now knew why the outer clans had declared war. He understood the full scope of the prophecy, and why he couldn't simply walk away from this. The next steps were clear. "They'll come for us," Jake said, his voice colder now, harder. "They'll try to tear us down. We can't hide from this anymore." Avalora nodded. "But we don't have to face it alone. The people, they look to you now. and we will fight together." Jake looked at her, his resolve hardening. "Then we'll show them that we're ready. We'll finish what the first king started." As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Jake realized something else. The throne was not just a symbol of power, it was a weapon. The first king had built this empire, but it had been betrayed and broken by those who feared his power. Now, it was Jake's turn to pick up the crown and restore what was lost. But the price of this victory would be high. The war was far from over. And in the end, Jake would have to choose. Would he become the ruler his enemies feared, or would he lose everything in the process? "I was just pretending. Now, I can't let her go." Jake Carter stood on the balcony, his eyes sweeping over the royal city below. The once calm streets were now filled with soldiers preparing for the final assault. In the distance, the looming silhouette of the enemy fleet hung in the sky, as if taunting him, daring him to act. The weight of the crown felt heavier than ever. He had come here by accident, just a man trying to survive. He had told a lie to save his life, pretending to be the fiancé of a princess. But now he wasn't pretending. Not anymore. Jake was king. And with that title came a responsibility he had never asked for and never wanted. The kingdom's future rested on his shoulders, and every decision he made would decide whether they lived or died. Avalora stood beside him, her presence calming in the midst of the chaos. Her hair was tied back in a regal fashion, and her eyes glowed with a quiet determination. She had always been strong, but today she looked even more like the ruler she was born to be. "I didn't ask for this," Jake said, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse, as if the words had been building up for days. "This life, this kingdom, I didn't ask for any of it." Avalora turned to face him, her expression gentle but firm. "None of us asked for the burdens we carried, Jake, but that doesn't mean we get to walk away from them." He looked at her, his chest tightening with emotions he couldn't quite name. "I thought I could leave. I thought I could go back to my old life. But I can't. I'm not that person anymore." "No," she whispered, stepping closer to him. "You're not." Jake met her gaze, and for the first time, he didn't feel like he was just playing a role. He felt the weight of the truth, the weight of his choice, and the unspoken bond that had formed between them. What had started as a lie, a desperate attempt to survive, had grown into something real. With a final push, Jake activated the ship's most powerful weapon. A beam of concentrated energy shot out, striking the flagship's core. The ship trembled, and then it exploded in a massive fireball. Silence. The enemy fleet faltered. The remaining warships veered off course, retreating into the darkness of space. The battle was won. But Jake knew this war wasn't over. He had won a battle, but the war had only just begun. Later, as the sun rose over the palace city, Jake stood beside Avalora, watching the wreckage of the enemy fleet drift into the vastness of space. The threat had been pushed back, for now. But Jake knew the cost. The people were celebrating, but the price of this victory was higher than anyone realized. The enemies who had retreated would return. And next time, they might not be so easy to defeat. He turned to Avalora. "What happens now?" She smiled softly, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Now we prepare, and we wait for the next storm to come." Jake nodded. The war was far from over. And now it was personal. The truth behind the throne. Jake Carter stood at the edge of the palace balcony, staring out at the royal city below. The streets were quiet for now, but he knew that peace was fragile. The battle had been won, but only at a great cost. The outer clans had been pushed back, their flagship destroyed. But the true enemy remained, the conspiracy that ran through the heart of the kingdom. Avalora stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on the stone railing. The winds of the night carried a faint hum, as if the very air was trying to whisper the secrets of the universe. But all Jake could hear was the deafening silence in his mind. "Do you ever wonder if we'll ever have peace?" he asked. Avalora turned to face him, her expression unreadable. Peace is a lie, Jake. It's a story they tell to keep the people calm. But power is the truth, and power never stays still for long. Jake's heart tightened. He had come here to escape, to survive. And now he was tangled in a web of lies, ancient prophecies, and a war he didn't start, but was now forced to finish. Avalora noticed his hesitation and walked toward him, her boots clicking softly on the stone floor. "You're thinking of leaving, aren't you?" Jake shook his head. "I don't know what I'm thinking anymore, but I can't keep pretending to be something I'm not." She sighed. "You're not pretending, Jake. You are the king now. The people believe in you. I believe in you." He turned toward her, frustration building inside him. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be this king. I just—" He stopped, searching for the right words. "I want to know the truth. Everything. Why did they attack us? Why is this war happening? And why? Why was I brought here?" Avalora's eyes softened. "You deserve the truth." The chamber beneath the palace was cold. Ancient stone walls lined with faded tapestries of long-forgotten kings surrounded them. Avalora led Jake through the corridors, her pace quickening as they neared the heart of the royal vault. Here, behind locked doors, lay the history of the kingdom, the true history, hidden from the world. They reached the vault's entrance, a door carved with symbols that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly glow. Avalora placed her hand on the cool surface, and the door groaned open, revealing a massive chamber beyond. Inside were rows of stone pillars, each one engraved with the names and deeds of past rulers. At the far end of the room stood a large pedestal, on which lay an ancient tome, its pages worn with age, its cover cracked from centuries of neglect. Jake's breath caught. "What is this place?" "The throne of truth," Avalora said quietly. "It's where the ruling family hides the knowledge of our world's true past. The real reason our empire fell. And why you're here now." She walked to the pedestal, carefully lifting the book from its resting place. As she opened the first page, the room seemed to shift. Faint whispers filled the air, like the voices of those who had come before them. Avalora spoke softly, reading aloud the ancient words. "In the beginning, we were many, many worlds, many people. A great empire was built, not of blood, but of power. But power, when unchecked, destroys all. A king was born from another world, a human who ruled with fire and fury, his strength unmatched. He became one with the stars, and they worshipped him as a god. But his love for the princess of his world, became his undoing." Jake's heart raced as Avalora continued. The king was betrayed by his closest allies, by the ones who had promised him peace, and when he fell, the empire fell with him. Jake stepped closer. This king, it's him, isn't it? The one from the prophecy, the one they said would return." Avalora nodded. "Yes, the first human king. And you are his image. His reincarnation, if you believe in such things." He couldn't escape it anymore. "How much time do we have?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside his chest. Avalora's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw the fear behind her calm facade. "Less than 24 hours. The outer clans will be here before dawn." Jake clenched his fists. "We have to prepare. We can't just sit here and wait for them to strike. We don't have the resources to fight them all," one of the generals said, his voice cold. He was an older alien with silver skin and eyes that glowed like twin suns. "The fleets are too strong. If we engage them, we risk everything." Jake's eyes burned with determination. "I didn't come all this way to sit and wait for a war to start. We can't lose. Not now." Avalora stepped closer to him, her voice soft but firm. "Jake, this isn't about fighting for the throne. This is about saving our people. You need to understand. The moment you declared yourself king, you became the symbol of hope for this entire world. If we lose, the people will lose everything. Jake nodded. He understood the weight of the crown now. He hadn't just married a princess. He had become a king, and with it came the responsibility of an entire kingdom. That night, the palace was alive with movement. Soldiers prepared armor. Civilians were evacuated into the underground chambers. Ships were readied, weapons tested, and energy shields reinforced. Jake and Avalora moved between groups, giving orders, ensuring everything was in place. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. Jake's armor felt heavier than ever as he moved through the halls. Each step echoed in his ears. He wasn't just leading an army. He was leading the last line of defense against a war he hadn't started, against enemies he didn't understand. But he wasn't going to back down. The first attack came at dawn. The sky over the palace city darkened as the enemy fleets approached, their ships moving like dark shadows against the twin moons. They were here. Jake stood on the balcony, his heart pounding in his chest. Avalora stood beside him, her face steely with determination. "They're in range," one of the advisors reported. "Shields are up, but they'll only last so long." Jake turned to Avalora. "What's the plan?" She didn't hesitate. "We have one chance. We can't defeat them head-on, but we can outsmart them." Jake furrowed his brow. "Outsmart them? How?" Avalora's eyes flickered toward the sky. "We'll use the shipyards, surround them with decoys, make them think we're weaker than we are, and we'll draw their main fleet into the outer atmosphere. Once we have them there, we'll hit them with everything we have." Jake nodded. "Sounds risky." "It's the only plan we have." The battle began within hours. Jake's ships, small and agile, darted around the towering enemy fleets, attacking and retreating like shadows. It wasn't enough to defeat them, but it was enough to confuse them. The enemy didn't know who they were fighting, and that uncertainty worked in their favor. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. The real test was coming. The main fleet would be upon them soon. And then it came. A massive enemy warship, nearly the size of a small city, appeared from the darkness. It was the flagship, the heart of the Outer Clan's fleet. The moment Jake saw it, he knew what had to happen. "This is it," Jake said, his voice low. "We need to take out their flagship." Avalora looked at him, eyes narrowed. "You know what that means, right?" Jake clenched his fists. "I know. If we don't take out their flagship, we lose everything." The plan was risky, but it was the only chance they had. Jake and Avalora made their way to the Royal Command ship, the largest of their fleet. From there, they would launch the final strike. As they boarded, Jake felt the weight of the decision sink in. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of everything he had come to care about. Avalora, the people, the kingdom. The Royal Command ship broke through the enemy line, heading straight for the flagship. Jake's heart raced as they got closer. The enemy didn't expect them to make such a bold move. The flagship turned toward them, weapons charging. Jake's voice rang out, "All units, fire on my command." He took a deep breath. The moment had come. Now, the ship fired everything they had. A blinding flash of light filled the space between the two fleets. The enemy flagship's shields cracked, and in that moment of vulnerability, Jake saw the opportunity. "We've got them," Avalora whispered. Jake gritted his teeth. "No, we haven't. Not yet. But the prophecy speaks of a false king, one who arrives through fire, bound by accident, but rises to power when needed most." Jake's mind raced. "That's exactly what happened to me." Avalora nodded. "Yes, which means your lie might have awakened something we don't understand." Jake felt a chill crawl up his spine. "You said this truth might save your life." "How?" She walked to the pool and touched the water. "Because those who want the throne fear the return of the ancient king. They fear his power, his memory. If they believe you are him, they won't move so easily." Jake stood. "Unless they want to kill me first." "Exactly." Later that night, Jake walked alone through the royal garden. He passed trees that whispered secrets, flowers that opened when touched. Small animals with glowing fur watched from the shadows. He needed air, space, a moment to think. Was he really some kind of reincarnation? It didn't make sense, but at the same time, nothing here had made sense since he crashed. The armor, the prophecy, the way Avalora looked at him like he had always been meant to be here. Then he heard a voice from the trees. "You should have stayed dead." Jake spun around. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a cloaked alien with red eyes and silver tattoos across his face. "I don't want trouble," Jake said, raising his hands. The alien pulled out a long blade. Too late. The true king must not rise. Jake barely had time to react. The assassin lunged, but Jake's armor activated just in time, covering his chest and arms. Sparks flew as the blade bounced off. Jake struck back with a glowing punch, sending the attacker flying into a tree. Guards arrived moments later and dragged the figure away. Jake stood there, breathing hard. The words echoed in his head. The true king must not rise. Back inside the palace, Avalora waited for him. "You're bleeding," she said, touching a scratch on his cheek. "Another one tried to kill me," Jake said flatly. "Said I should have stayed dead." Her face darkened. "The prophecy is spreading." "Then maybe it's time I stopped pretending," Jake said. She looked confused. "What do you mean?" He looked at her, his voice firm. "If I'm going to carry this lie, if I'm going to wear this armor and stand beside you, I need to stop running from it. I need to own it." She smiled softly, like someone who had waited a long time for those words. "Then let's prepare for war," she said. Jake nodded. "Let them come. I'm ready." "The war I didn't start." Jake Carter stood at the edge of the war room, watching the holographic map shimmer with red dots. Each one represented an enemy fleet, 5 massive warships making their way toward the royal capital, and every fleet had its own unique insignia, an emblem of power, hate, and vengeance. Avalora stood beside him, her presence as strong as the stars that shone through the glass walls of the room. She was calm, too calm, as if the weight of the situation was nothing more than another puzzle to solve. Jake felt the weight of the room's silence press down on him. 1,000 voices echoed in his head. Noblemen, generals, all of them staring at him, waiting for him to speak. He was the king now. His word was law. But he wasn't sure what to say. The last few days had been a blur. The battle at the feast had shown him what he was capable of, what his armor could do. But facing fleets of warships bent on destroying everything he had come to care about, that was something else entirely. How had it all escalated so quickly? He glanced at Avalora. Her eyes were focused on the map, but he saw the strain in her shoulders, the slight tension in her jaw. He knew what she was thinking. The prophecy, the ancient king's return, and the people who wanted him dead. Jake had tried to ignore the weight of that prophecy, but the more he learned about the past, the ancient war, the betrayal, the fall of the human king, the more he realized that the truth might be more dangerous than the lie he had created. The prophecy wasn't just about him. It was about a legacy that had the power to bring destruction. The general who had mocked him earlier stepped forward. He bowed low. "Your Majesty, forgive me. You have proven yourself." Jake nodded, still panting. Avalora stood beside him. "The king has spoken. He has defended his people." Jake looked around. These aliens weren't strangers anymore. They were his people now. Later, in private, Avalora sat with Jake in the royal garden under the moonlight. "You saved me," she said. "You saved me first," he replied. She looked into his eyes. "They'll come again. Stronger." "I'll be ready," Jake said. "You're not the same man who crashed here days ago." He smiled. "No, I think that man died the moment," he said. "I'm her fiancé." Avalora reached out and held his hand. "And now you're king." Jake looked up at the stars. Then let them come. I won't run. Not now. Not ever. Her secret, my burden. The stars above the palace were quiet, but Jake's heart was not. He stood alone on the highest balcony of the tower, wearing the living armor that had bonded to him. The wind brushed his face as twin moons watched silently from the sky. Down below, the royal city lights flickered like fireflies, unaware that danger was rising just beyond the horizon. Jake clenched his fists. He had been a pilot, a loner, a nobody drifting through space. But now he was king, and someone wanted him dead. The attack at the feast had been too fast, too perfect. That assassin hadn't just tried to kill anyone. He had aimed straight for Avalora. The princess, no, his wife now, was still in danger. Jake turned when he heard soft footsteps behind him. It was her. She wore a deep blue robe that shimmered like night water, her hair tied with strands of silver light. Her face looked calm, but her eyes were tired. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "Not with someone trying to stab us every other day." She gave a weak smile and joined him at the edge of the balcony. They stood there together in silence for a while. Then Jake spoke. "There's something you're not telling me." Avalora didn't answer right away. "I'm not stupid," Jake continued. "The way the generals watch you. The way the people whisper. The way the assassin knew exactly where to strike. This isn't just about me being an outsider." She looked at him, eyes heavy. "You're right." Jake turned toward her fully. "So tell me, please, what is it that you're hiding?" Avalora sighed. "Follow me." They walked down spiral stairs into the heart of the palace. Torches lit the way, even though there were no flames. Instead, they burned with cold blue fire. At the very bottom, a sealed door waited. It opened with the touch of her palm. Inside was a chamber made of black stone. In the center was a pool of glowing water. Strange alien symbols floated above it, changing shape every few seconds. "This is the vault of memory," she said. "It holds the truth of our past, and a warning for the future." Jake stepped forward, cautious. "What does this have to do with me?" Avalora didn't answer with words. Instead, she waved her hand over the pool. Images rose from the water, shifting lights and shadows, forming a scene. Jake saw a tall figure in ancient armor, a human, leading alien warriors into battle. The figure raised a shining sword and shouted in a language Jake couldn't understand. The people followed him like a god. Another image showed the same man standing beside a woman who looked exactly like Avalora. They were crowned together as rulers. A great empire rose behind them. Then, war, flames, betrayal. The human king fell, stabbed by his closest friend. The crown shattered. The empire collapsed. The water stilled. Jake stared at it, stunned. That was a human. Avalora nodded. 1,000 years ago, a star traveler came to our world. He rose quickly. He married the ruling princess, my ancestor. They ruled together until he was betrayed. Jake stepped back. "So why show me this?" Avalora looked at him with soft eyes. "Because you look exactly like him." Jake's heart stopped. "What?" "I didn't lie when I said your presence changed everything. When you claimed to be my fiancé, I thought it was fake playing a trick. But when I saw your face, I knew." "Knew what?" Jake asked, voice tense. "That you are either a sign or a curse." Jake sat down heavily on a stone bench. "You think I'm him?" "I don't know," Avalora whispered. "But the people believe. Some think you're his soul returned. Others believe you're his enemy reborn." Jake looked at his hands. "I'm not a king. I'm not a ghost. I'm just a guy who crashed here." Enemies of the crown. Jake Carter had worn many things in his life. Flight suits, mechanic jumpsuits, even a second-hand tux once at a casino wedding. But nothing felt heavier than the glowing royal robe now hanging on his shoulders. He stood at the center of the palace's inner war chamber, surrounded by alien nobles, generals with metal claws, and advisors with crystal eyes. The large table floated in the air between them, displaying a 3D map of the kingdom, glowing cities, floating warships, and red blinking dots. Each red dot meant danger. "You've been king for one day," whispered Princess Avalora beside him. "And already, the wolves are moving." Jake didn't respond. He was still trying to remember which fork to use at breakfast. A general slammed his clawed fist on the table. "We should never have accepted a human. He is weak. He knows nothing of our enemies or our ways." Jake looked him dead in the eye. "You're right. I know nothing. But I'm still here." Gasps filled the room. One of the nobles choked on their drink. Avalora smiled slightly. The general bared his teeth. "You speak boldly for someone who only came here by mistake." Jake stepped forward. "Maybe it was a mistake, but I made a vow. I married your princess, and I'm not leaving her side." The table glitched for a moment from the sudden energy in the room. Another advisor spoke, his voice smooth like oil. "Very touching. But words are air. Action matters. The outer clans are moving. They don't respect your union. In fact," he flicked his hand, and the map zoomed in. "They're preparing to strike." Jake saw it. 5 fleets of alien warships moving toward the palace city. Each ship looked like a flying beast, glowing with dangerous energy. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. 3 days, the advisor said. "Maybe less." Jake turned to Avalora. "Do we fight?" She looked at the map, her face unreadable. "We show them you are more than just a lie." Later that day, Jake followed Avalora through a long hallway that sloped underground. The walls were made of old stone, covered in carvings. Strange alien words and battle scenes told stories older than anything Jake had seen. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To where kings are made," she said. They reached a sealed door. Avalora placed her hand on a glowing panel. The door opened with a low hum. Inside was a circular room with weapons hanging on the walls. But they weren't just weapons. They glowed. They hummed. Some floated on their own. And in the center was a platform with a suit of armor standing upright. Black, silver, and pulsing like it was alive. Jake stepped closer. "What is this place?" Avalora looked at him. "This is the armory of kings. Every true ruler of our world has come here. It's time you did too." Jake shook his head. "I'm not ready." "You don't have time to be ready," she said. "War doesn't wait. Enemies don't wait." Jake stared at the armor. "It looks alive. It's bonded tech. It responds to thought, to purpose," she explained. "If it accepts you, it will become part of you. And if it doesn't?" She didn't answer. Jake stepped onto the platform. The armor opened slowly. Lights flickered. Energy filled the room like a quiet storm. He closed his eyes and stepped in. Pain shot through his body. His mind screamed. Images flashed. Stars exploding, alien battles, a king dying in fire. Then silence. The armor closed. Jake stood still, breathing, alive. The room bowed its head, even Avalora. "It has chosen you," she whispered. That night, during a royal feast, the court celebrated the bonding between king and armor. Food floated on silver plates. Music from 100 instruments filled the air. Jake sat beside Avalora, still trying to process everything. Suddenly, a scream broke the music. Guards rushed forward. One fell, cut down by a blade. From the shadows, a masked figure appeared, fast, silent, deadly, a flash of metal. A dagger thrown, straight at Avalora. Jake moved without thinking. His new armor reacted instantly, covering him in full form in less than a second. The dagger hit his chest and bounced off. The crowd gasped. Jake raised his arm, and a glowing shield appeared. "Get down," he shouted. The assassin attacked again, But Jake blocked each strike, moving like someone who had trained for years. The armor guided him, flowed with him. With a final blast from his gauntlet, Jake knocked the attacker across the hall. Guards tackled the figure and dragged them away. Silence filled the room. Then the noble stood and bowed. "The wedding I didn't want." Jake couldn't sleep. He sat on the soft alien cushions in a room that glowed with blue light. The ceiling above him sparkled like stars, and strange music drifted through the air, like the sound of wind and water mixed together. It should have felt peaceful, but Jake's mind was racing. A wedding? Tomorrow. He wasn't ready to marry a human, let alone an alien princess from another world. This had started as a lie, a desperate move to stay alive. But now it felt real. Too real. He stood up and looked at himself in the mirror. His face was bruised, his clothes torn. He didn't look like a king. He didn't even look like someone who belonged in a royal palace. A quiet knock came at the door. "Enter," he said hesitantly. The princess walked in, wearing a long robe made of silver threads. Her eyes glowed slightly in the dim light. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said softly. "I feel like one," Jake replied. She studied him, still thinking of running. Jake didn't answer right away. "I'm not a hero. I'm not a leader. I'm not your fiancé." "I know," she said calmly. Jake blinked. "Then why are you doing this?" She walked to the balcony and looked out at the twin moons. "Because you gave me a chance I didn't have before. A way out. A shield." Jake stepped closer. "You're a princess. You don't need a shield." "You don't understand," she said, her voice quieter now. "They want to control me. The elders, the generals, even my own family. But if I marry a powerful outsider, even one they don't understand, it changes the game. But I'm not powerful." She turned to him and whispered, "Then become someone who is." The next morning, the palace woke up early. Drums echoed across the stone floors. Bright orbs floated in the air, casting soft light everywhere. Servants moved quickly, decorating halls with flowers that shimmered in the air and changed color when touched. Jake was taken by guards, not unkindly, but firmly, to a golden room filled with robes. An older alien with 6 fingers and sharp eyes looked Jake up and down. "You are average," he said bluntly. "Thanks," Jake muttered. "But with the right clothing." The tailor snapped his fingers. In seconds, glowing armor-like robes formed around Jake's body. The cloth shimmered like liquid glass, strong but smooth. Jake stared at himself in the mirror. He looked like someone else, someone important. "Fit for a king," the tailor said. In the great hall, thousands had gathered. There were alien nobles in floating chairs, warriors in armor with blinking helmets, and children with wings hovering in the air. The entire royal court was watching. Jake's heart pounded. He stood next to the princess, who looked calm and confident. Her gown was made of stardust, literally glowing as she moved. She looked like something out of a dream. "Just follow my lead," she whispered again. "Right," Jake said, dry-mouthed. An alien priest with 6 glowing eyes raised his arms. "Today, 2 worlds join as one." Jake tried not to panic. The ceremony began. It was strange and beautiful. Symbols lit up in the air. Soft music played that seemed to come from the walls. At one point, a flower opened in midair and released glowing dust that swirled around them like stars. Then came the vows. The priest looked at Jake. "Do you, stranger from the stars, accept this bond freely, with heart and soul?" Jake opened his mouth. For a second, his brain screamed, "Say no. This is a mistake." But then he saw the princess, not just her beauty, but her strength, her pain, her hope. She had risked a lot for this. For him. Jake took a deep breath. Yes. The crowd cheered. Then the priest turned to the princess. "And do you, daughter of the stars, accept this outsider as your chosen mate? "I do," she said, never breaking eye contact with Jake. A soft glow connected their hands as they touched. The symbol of their new union appeared in the air above them, 2 stars spinning together. "It is done," the priest declared. The crowd exploded with joy. Jake smiled weakly, still trying to believe what had just happened. Later that evening, in the royal garden, Jake sat beside the princess on a stone bench surrounded by glowing plants. "I still don't get it," he said. "Why didn't you tell them the truth?" She looked at the stars. "Because sometimes lies can become the only way to survive." Jake looked at her. "And what now?" She smiled slightly. "Now you're my king." Jake laughed nervously. "This is insane." "Yes," she said, "but now it's real. And soon, others will challenge us. They'll test you, try to destroy us." He swallowed hard. "So, what do I do?" She stood up and offered him her hand. "You learn, you fight, and you become what they fear." Jake took her hand, and for the first time, he didn't feel like he was faking. "The lie that saved my life." Jake Carter had no idea how fast things could go wrong in space. One minute he was flying his small cargo ship across Sector 9, heading toward a mining station. The next minute, alarms were screaming, smoke filled the cabin, and the stars outside spun like crazy. Something had hit his ship, something big. The ship crash-landed on a strange alien planet. Jake barely made it out alive. His arms were cut, his leg was bleeding, and the air smelled like burnt metal. But he was breathing. That was a good sign. He limped away from the wreck, hoping to find help. Instead, he found trouble. They came out of the shadows, tall, blue-skinned aliens with sharp armor and glowing eyes. They didn't look friendly. Jake raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat, but they didn't care. One of them knocked him to the ground and tied his hands with glowing ropes. They took him to a dusty camp full of strange tents and fire pits. The leader, a tall alien with a golden mask, looked at Jake with hate in his eyes. "A human," he growled. "A spy." "I'm not a spy," Jake said quickly. "I crashed here by accident. Please, I just want to fix my ship and leave." The alien leader laughed. "You think we believe that? You came from the stars. You're the enemy." Jake looked around. Warriors stood ready with weapons. He was outnumbered, weak, and unarmed. He needed to think fast, or he was going to die here. Then Jake remembered something. A small rumor he had heard in a spaceport bar months ago. A war, a princess, a powerful royal family on a planet in this system. So he said the first thing that came to his mind. "I'm the princess's fiancé." Everything went silent. The aliens looked at each other, confused. Some stepped back. The golden-masked leader tilted his head. "What did you say, human?" Jake swallowed hard. "I was sent here to marry the princess. I was chosen. It's part of a peace deal." The silence stretched. Then, to his surprise, the golden-masked alien didn't strike him. Instead, he laughed, loud and deep. "You, the princess's chosen one," he said. "This is too rich. Let's see what she says." Jake didn't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, but at least they didn't kill him. They took him across the desert in a strange flying cage. The sky was dark purple, and 2 moons lit the night. After hours of flying, they landed near a massive palace made of silver stone. Towers rose high, and lights floated in the air like stars. Guards led Jake into a great hall filled with alien nobles. At the end of the room stood her, the alien princess. She was tall, glowing slightly, with eyes like deep water and silver markings on her face. Her long dark hair flowed like a river, and she wore a crown made of stars. Jake's heart skipped. She didn't look angry. She didn't look surprised. She looked amused. The golden-masked alien stepped forward. "He claims to be your fiancé." The whole room held its breath. The princess walked slowly to Jake. Her eyes searched his face. For a moment, He thought she would expose him. But then she smiled. "Yes," she said, "this is him, my chosen one." Gasps echoed across the hall. Jake blinked. "Wait, what?" She turned to the others. "We planned to keep it secret until the right time, but it seems the truth has come out." The golden-masked alien growled in frustration but said nothing. Jake was still confused, but he played along. "Yes, that's right." The princess leaned closer and whispered, "Don't talk, just follow my lead." Jake nodded, unsure of what game she was playing. But he was alive. That was enough for now. Later, in a quiet room filled with glowing plants, she finally spoke. "You lied to save your life," she said calmly. "Smart." Jake stared at her. "Why did you go along with it?" She looked out the window. "Because your lie might save my life too." "What does that mean?" She turned to him, eyes serious. "This kingdom is on the edge of war. Many want my throne. But if they think I'm bonded to a powerful off-worlder, they might think twice before attacking." "I'm not powerful," Jake said. "I'm just a pilot." She smiled again. "They don't know that. Now, get ready." "For what?" She walked toward the door. "The wedding is tomorrow." Jake's jaw dropped. "Wait, what?"